Hello and assalamu alaikum. I am Kashif Kamran, your tutor, and welcome to another episode, the fifth episode of Understanding the 20 Professional Marks in the AAA paper. Just a quick recap. The first episode was focused on a holistic overview of how the marks will be split between Section A and Section B in terms of professional marks. The second episode focused on commercial communication skills. The third episode focus on analysis and evaluation. The fourth focus on skepticism and judgment. And this fifth one today will be focused on commercial acumen. Now, the episode 5 is focused on commercial acumen, which is the last skill which has been introduced in the AAA paper. Now, let's understand what your examining team means by commercial acumen and how they want this to be tested and demonstrated by the student at the end of the day. Now, first of all, a commercial acumen means what? A commercial acumen means having a know-how. Auditors should have a knowledge of business. Auditors should have a know-how about the client, its operations, its industry, its challenges, its problems, its issues, external environment in which the client operates, the internal issues of the client, and everything. Probably you know about the SWOT analysis of your client. You know about how the external environment influences your client. What are industry problems? What are client-specific problems? What are laws and regulations and how they affect the client? And you have a holistic idea about client. And this is exactly what the auditor do at the planning stage of the audit. This is exactly what the auditor do at the client screening stage of the audit. When you are gathering the information about client, you're gathering the information about knowing your client. So know-how is the commercial acumen, and then taking sound decisions within that know-how. Let's see how. Commercial acumen. Questions in the AAA paper are set in commercially realistic scenarios ranging from a private to a public sector organizations, not-for-profit organizations, and regulated industries. We have seen that when you look at the organizations in the AAA paper from question number 1 to 2 to 3, at times you find a listed company. At times you find a family business. At times you find a non-profit organization like a hospital, and etc. Now, there is diversity of organizations which comes in the AAA paper, and every organization has a different external environment, issues, challenges, risk, problems, weaknesses, and the auditor should have a know-how. Auditor should have a know-how of a family business and how it's run. Auditor should have a know-how of listed companies and how they are run. Auditor should have an understanding of how a public sector, for example, a hospital is run, because that know-how will help you take the right decisions in the context of your exam paper, and so on and so forth, or might help you with the exercising of other professional skills you have in the AAA paper, as guided to you in the previous episodes. Now, how would you go about, and where can you expect a commercial acumen to be exercised by you, apart from the diversity of organizations and knowing about them in exam paper? Candidates may be asked, let's see what. Candidates may be asked to demonstrate their commercial acumen by assessing the business risk affecting the client at the planning stage. For example, a specific regulatory requirement or the impact of the competition on future business. Now, we know that in the first question, examiner asks you to evaluate the business risk. Now, if you are evaluating the business risk, we know that in a business risk, you need to pick up a situation which can have a negative impact on the business operation. There might be any situation in the exam paper. It might be a regulatory situation. It might be an internal control weakness, or it might be something associated with a stakeholder dissatisfaction, or it might be something relating to your liquidity problems, etc. And there might be a situation relating to a threat of competition coming from your competitor. Now, a situation giving rise to business risk, whatever that is. But you need to exercise your commercial acumen here, a know-how here, that how would that situation really impact the business, really impact the client? What will be the effect of that risk on their profitability or on their market share or on their competitive advantage? Because we know the impact is on your business objectives. Now, if you know the business objectives of your organization very well, you will be writing a very good impact of a business risk. That whether the impact is on your profitability, current or future, whether it is on your liquidity, current or future, whether it is on the stakeholder relationship, current or future, whether it is on your market share, whether it is on your competitive advantage. So when you are asked to assess the business risk affecting the client, first of all, know who the client is, then know what is the business objectives of the client. And then you need to link the risk to the impact. For example, there is a regulatory requirements coming in. How would the regulatory requirement affects the client? Will those regulatory requirements increase the compliance risk for the business? And if the business is not complying with those laws and regulations in future, can it result into penalties? Can it result into bad reputations if you're not complying with the laws and regulations, etc.? Can you lose your competitive advantage if you're not complying with the laws and regulations, so on and so forth? So if there is a regulatory law coming in, for example, how would that regulatory law affect the future business? Will that increase your exposure to compliance? And if you're not complying, how would that risk of non-compliance affect your future profits, market share, competitive position, etc.? So if you have attended my previous webinars, if you've taken my classes, and you know how I discuss business risk in my webinars generally, that is, you need to pick up a business situation, a situation which adversely impacts the business, and you're capable of telling what exactly the impact will be, because the impact is on the business objectives. So you should know, you should have a know-how of the business objectives. You should know which business objective will be more drastically affected because of the business risk. So that is important. If there is a competition, how would the competition affect your future business? How would the competition affect your future sales? How would the competition affect your future profitability, future market share? So we know the business risk is not, the impact of the business risk is not necessarily in the present. The impact of the business risk can be evolving, and it might hurt you as a business in the future. So the bullet number 2 is giving you one example where and how commercial acumen could be demonstrated by a student. So that's primarily in the question number 1. And we know the skill of commercial acumen is equally tested in the section A as well as in section B. Taking another example, factor affecting a client may highlight issues regarding the future trading success of the business. For example, there is an opportunity to expand the business, but consideration needs to be given as to how this will affect the current operation. We know there are questions in AAA which ask you comment on the matters which may affect the going concern of the company. And this is very common in section B, that you are asked to comment on the matters which may affect the foreseeable future of the business. You need to exercise your commercial acumen here. You need to exercise your know-how, that if there is any matter given in the case study, how would that matter affect your foreseeable future? How would that affect your trading in the future? There might be opportunities, there might be threats. You need to look at the future trading of the business. You need to see how the current situation given in the case study affects the future trading of the business. Now, a question on going concern will give you the problems the client is facing, not just the threats, but also the opportunities. There will be a blend of them. You need to pick up the threats realistically and tell how this will impact the foreseeable future of my business, of which I am the auditor. How will this affect the trading success of my business? How can this affect the trading of my business in the next 12 months? So you need to be realistic. You need to understand the situation given in the exam paper and its effect on the foreseeable future success of your client. So a question on going concern will also be testing your commercial acumen, because you should have a know-how of how a situation can result in an adverse impact on your going concern in the next 12 months, and how can it be a material uncertainty for your future. So a business risk and its impact on business, any situations like going concern situations impacting on your future trading as a business, you need to have a realistic know-how of the business, its problems, its issues, and how will they impact the success of the business. Because for the auditor, the know-how is important, and for the auditor to understand the business risk and the going concern problem is extremely important, because we know the going concern then directly affects the auditor opinion, it directly affects the auditor report, and something relating to business risk directly affects the auditor knowledge of business. And there are lots of business risk which helps auditor identify the risk of material misstatements later. So the cut short story, before I take the last perspective, in commercial acumen, your know-how is important, how much you know the client. Again, the case study will help you develop the know-how, because in the AAA paper, your know-how is developed by reading the case. So when you're reading the case, you develop the know-how about the client, its business, its operation, its problems, its issues. So your know-how is just confined to the case study, like 1,000 words, 500 words given by the examiner. Now, once you get the know-how and you sit down and you evaluate the business risk, so you will ensure that the know-how you gathered is translating into your answer, is translating into the impact of a business risk on the business, or your know-how from a going concern scenario is converting into the impact of the problem on the foreseeable future of the business. So that's where you can exercise and demonstrate the know-how. Moving further, taking few more examples. Commercial acumen. Candidates need to look at the external constraints given in the case study, like the external factors like the threats and the opportunities where relevant, and also consider the validity and reasonableness of any assumption that the organization may be working under given the external environment. A lot of time, the management, when they are giving you the information about their going concern, and they're giving you situations in the case study which might be negative and positive, the management might claim a lot of things about future. For example, they have a very negative looking cash flow. They're facing a lot of liquidity problems, and their sales are going down. There is an emergence of a significant competitor, and the significant competitor is threatening their future sales. The demand of the product is going down. These are all pessimistic things, but all of a sudden, the management comes with a claim. And the claim is that in the next 6 months, we are launching a new product. And the new product will bring good sales for us, better sales for us, and we'll regain the market share. And our liquidity position will improve from negative to positive in the next 6 months. Now you say, okay, the current situation is very threatful. Everything is going down. But all of a sudden, the management is coming with a claim that in the next 6 months, a new product will come in. That's an assumption. The new product will have a good sales. That is an assumption. The good sales will improve the liquidity. That is an assumption. The negative cash flows will convert to positive. That is an assumption, because this all depends upon the next 6 months. Now, you should have a know-how. You should exercise your commercial acumen. You should realistically evaluate the management assumption here, that how is this possible? Do they have any plans? Do they have any feasibility studies? Do they have any market research reports? Have they started the research and development phase of the new product? At what stage is the research and development at? Is it likely that the product will be in the market in the next 6 months? What is the sales forecast? So you need to question management a lot here. You need to ensure that if the management is taking an assumption, a very optimistic assumption in a very pessimistic environment, is that optimistic assumption realistic? So there is a pessimistic environment. Competitor is threatening your future, your sales are going down, demand for your product is going down, your cash flows are negative. This is all a pessimistic environment. And management comes with something very optimistic that in the next 6 months, everything will change. So in a pessimistic environment, a very optimistic assumption, and as an auditor, you need to be realistic. That's where the know-how is coming in. That's where the know-how of the current business situation is coming in. That the current business situation is pessimistic. So you are looking at optimistic very carefully. So again, the scenario is a know-how. So you're not going in the exam hall with a predefined know-how. The scenario in the exam paper will build up your know-how, and in the context of that know-how, you need to exercise that whether the management assumptions are realistic, unrealistic. Even a question on prospective financial information, which is very common in the section B. A question on cash flow forecast is very common in section B, where management takes assumptions about cash flows, management takes assumptions about profit in a question on prospective financial information. So you need to consider the assumptions of management in context of the know-how you got from the case study, whether those assumptions are realistic, unrealistic, credible, or not credible. So a question on PFI, a question on going concern can be potential areas where commercial acumen needs to be exercised in the context. Even a question on business risk is a potential where commercial acumen needs to be exercised. The last one, candidates may show commercial acumen by assessing the impact of the engagement on the audit firm. This may be relevant in a scenario which requires evaluation whether to accept the engagement or not. Now, this is a practice management, syllabus area C in the AAA paper, where a question comes in section B, at times in section A, which asks you evaluate the matters to consider whether to accept a new audit client or not. And there is a new client in the case study, and you are evaluating the matters, know-how, client screening, on the basis of the know-how given in the case study, on the basis of the client screening given in the case study, are you accepting the client or not? With every acceptance of a client, there is a fees. With every acceptance of the client, there is an income. With every acceptance of a client, there is an opportunity for the audit firm to earn income. But with the opportunities, there are risks. You're not taking on a bad client. You're not taking on a client which is involved in money laundering. You're not taking on a client which management is very bad. You're not taking on a client where the management is not giving you a permission to correspond with the previous auditor. So even a bad client has an income opportunity, and a good client has an income opportunity. Now, you might be greedy as an auditor, which is wrong. You might say, okay, let's accept the bad client. We are getting the income at the end of the day. That is not commercial acumen. The commercial acumen is that if it is a bad client, you should have a know-how of the bad situations. You should have the know-how of rejecting the client on the basis of the bad situations. That is the know-how. And if it is a good client, accepting the good client. So you need to do an analysis of risk versus benefit. So a bad client has risk that your reputation might be affected. The audit firm repute might be affected, even though you're getting the income. But a good client, when you compare the good client in risk versus benefits, there are no risk because it's a good client and you're getting the benefit, the income. So a question asking you evaluate the methods whether you should accept the new client or not. You should have the know-how from the case study, the factors given in the case study, and you realistically evaluate those factors to take a careful decision. And again, your judgment skill will come back here. You need to take a careful decision whether you are accepting the client or not. But your know-how from the case study, picking the right matters from the case study, putting the right matters in the answer is commercial acumen. And then exercising the right judgment is a judgment skill. So now, How many situations are there in the AAA paper where a commercial acumen can be exercised? Let's do a quick recap. I think the first situation we came across was a situation of business risk, where you should have a know-how from the case study, situation given in the case study, and you convert that know-how into identifying a risk and then putting a realistic impact which is in context of the case study. So business risk and the risk impact on the business. What is the impact of the risk on the business objective in the context of the case study? The second situation was a question on going concern, where you need to look at the future prospects of the business. You need to look at the knowledge given to you in the exam paper, the know-how given to you in the exam paper, how that affects the foreseeable future of the client. If the management is putting some opportunities, are those opportunities realistic in a pessimistic environment? A question on PFI, prospective financial information, which is very common in section B. And in PFI question, again, management takes a lot of assumptions in the context of the case study, in the context of the know-how the examiner is giving you. Are these assumptions realistic or unrealistic? And finally, a question on whether to accept a new client or not. Accepting a new client. So if you are accepting a new client in the AAA paper, on the basis of the know-how given in the exam paper, will you be accepting or will you be rejecting? So that's where the know-how will come in. Concluding, know-how is a case study, and the case study will develop your know-how. And in the know-how, you take the right judgments. You exercise the right judgments. So know-how will help you identify the problems, risk, issues, going concern matters, and matters relating to accepting a new client. And on the basis of those matters which you identified from the know-how, you will take the right judgment. So two skills blends together here. So this is commercial acumen. I hope you are all clear of the skill, the know-how, and how the know-how will come, how the know-how will translate into your answer, whether that is an answer on risk, matters in accepting a new client, PFI, going concern, etc. So this is wrapping up my first phase of understanding 20 professional skill marks in the AAA paper. It was a series of 5 episodes. This was the 5th one on commercial acumen, and I'll be coming up with more sessions soon. Even my webinar coming up soon, which will cover the 20 professional skill marks for September 2022 exams and onwards. So be watchful of my YouTube channel. Take care. Goodbye and Allah Hafiz. This is your tutor Kashif Kamran signing off from the episode 5 of Understanding 20 Professional Skill Marks in the AAA paper. The focus was on commercial acumen. Goodbye and Allah Hafiz.